You are watching a socially good TV special presentation.
Good morning, Greater Akron. Good morning. Thank you for being here. I know many of you. I'm Steve Millard with the Greater Akron Chamber. I'm excited that you're here today and you're joining us for our first Greater Akron Inclusion Summit, our inaugural event, if you will. We're energetic and optimistic. Today's event's being staged on behalf of the many organizations and individuals that have been involved with our focus on economic inclusion as a part of the Elevate Greater Akron Regional Economic Development Strategy. It's a starting point for what we believe is a long-term, candid conversation and set actions to specifically and collectively act on driving growth and opportunity in Greater Akron. I'll talk more about the partners in the effort and the work that we'll do, but I wanted to start the conversation being clear that this is something that's happening among all of us, teeing up many leaders for a broad cross-section of partners and organizations. The Chamber has the distinct honor and privilege of being the logistics provider of today's event and the convener, if you will, but the work that we're talking about today represents the work of more than 30 different organizations and 4 or 5 core partners who've really helped along this. So I want to make sure that we recognize that work is sort of a community piece of work, not just a piece of work for the Chamber. Before we dive in, I want to thank our sponsors. It may sound cliche, but it is the kind of work we can't do without additional support. And so a big thank you to our premier sponsors for today, the Akron Beacon Journal, Akron Children's Hospital, Akron Community Foundation, the City of Akron, First Energy, GAR Foundation, Huntington Bank, and Summit County. So thank you all for helping us do today. Can I give a round of applause for them, please? In addition, I want to thank the silver and supporting sponsors as well, whose companies are also listed on the screens behind me. Each of you have done something a little extra to make today happen, so we appreciate that. Finally, thanks to all of you in the room for taking the time to be here today, and those, many were not able to attend this morning but have sent their support for the work that we're doing. Your interest in this issue and your support for it is critical for us to take action. This is something that all of us have to take a part in, and one of our charges today is to make sure that you leave here with an idea, a thing, something that you're going to do or task or work with others to get done to advance this space. Today is just the first step, though. We know it's going to take us time. It took us time to get here. It's going to take us time to get to the next place, but we're committed to doing that. Our speakers and our panelists and presenters have also worked to keep today real. I had a great conversation last night with a number of leaders in Greater Akron, and one of the things we talked about was the fact that to move our community forward, we have to have more conversations, more ability to disagree openly about things, more ability to sort of push a little harder on what people think and connect that back to our work, because the meeting happens in the meeting, not after the meeting. And so if you've got questions, if you've got things that strike you today that you want to talk about, find one of us, ask a question, but we want to make sure we have a real conversation so that we can make progress on this work. We think that Greater Akron can be a place in the region that leads on inclusion, and we think we can do that because we have the support and effort of all of you to do that as well. So, again, this is a first step. We have a long way to go as a region, we know that, and as a business community to tackle the topic of inclusion. That said, I do want to acknowledge some progress that we've made so far. So just under a year ago, we presented the Elevate Greater Akron plan to the community. This is the plan outlining a regional economic development strategy. It was driven by the Chamber, the city, the county, and the GAR Foundation as we looked at what is going on with Greater Akron's economy, what are some of the issues that we have, and what are the strategies we need to pursue to take ourselves to the next level. One of the core components, maybe the most important component of this strategy, was focused on the critical need to address exclusion in Greater Akron. While exclusion at any level is undoubtedly unacceptable, the research we conducted pointed to the fact that it's more than just the right thing to do in Greater Akron. It's something that's going to have great economic opportunity for us if we can get our hands around it. And if we can take action and get businesses to take action in this space, because the business community is a significant player here, that action is going to drive growth for businesses and the economy. And so as we go forward, we simply can't afford to exclude the people that aren't participating in our economy if we want to grow the way we need to grow in Greater Akron. We've also tried hard to engage a variety of perspectives. So last fall, we put together the Opportunity Akron strategy team, which was the group focused on the inclusion parts of the Elevate Greater Akron work. The team has over 30 leaders on it, comprised of different parts of our community. These folks work pretty hard to guide us, cajole us, ask us questions, push us, make sure that we're focusing on the right things here. And we had a smaller set of that group who came together to really help us shape the narrative. Those folks got to do homework every week, got to provide information, and really kind of helped us shape the broader work that we did. In addition, So that helped create the narrative, and the narrative approach has been used by a few other communities, and Amy may talk about that a little bit later, as a starting point for their efforts. So we all had a common language and a common set of where we are. Often I've heard that phrase is, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but not their own facts. So we have to get our facts sort of together, if you will, as a community, so that we know where we're starting with this. I think, let's see here. I know I skipped something here. Yeah, right. So thank you. Bryn Popa, ladies and gentlemen, the brains behind the operation here. So I'm not using the, this little monitor here isn't even advancing, so we'll see. But anyway, so we had another group that we put together, Opportunity and Inclusion Committee at the Chamber. So when we talked about this with the Chamber, see, this is going to be a real conversation today, no pretense here. We're just going to sort of move through the day and go for and get that done. So we also put together at the Chamber, as we talked about this issue and talked with our CEOs about it, there was a real energy about how do we address this issue. And so they asked us to put together a specific group at the Chamber focused on opportunity and inclusion. And we were lucky enough to have Andre Thornton of ASW Global and Nick Browning of Huntington Bank agree to co-chair that for us. And we have a large number of leaders from the Chamber involved in that effort as well. Those folks have met about 3 times so far, really rolled up their sleeves and helped us think about where are we going next on this in support of Elevate Greater Akron and also to drive the business community as well. Can we change the conversation about race and gender equity into meaningful action? That's why we're here today, to turn from talk to action. One of the comments that we've made as we've worked through our research is, if this was just about the moral case, we'd be done by now. It's really also about the economic case. The economic case is what will allow more folks to take action and see action in their best interest in this space. That will help us drive growth for companies, for people, and for our community overall. With that, let's begin to share the narrative. Robert?
Let's just cut to the chase and get right into it, because today what we're here to talk about is inclusion. And as you all know, inclusion has many layers to it, and therefore we could spend easily days and weeks and months talking about this and unpacking the topic from a historical, social, and economic standpoint. But for purposes of today's conversation, we'll be focusing on the economic case for inclusion. And we will also be focusing primarily on the black population. This isn't to say that the black population is the only population that has been excluded. We know they're not. We believe that a focus on the black population as the largest excluded population in our region will not only have the greatest impact initially, but through this focus, we believe other excluded populations will also experience benefit in the process. And there's significant income inequality, which has led to the lack of competitiveness in our region. And we're going to give you some of those details today. But the good news is that we have an underutilized talent here in Akron that could help us solve this problem. And there are benefits that your organizations will realize by engaging these individuals and by investing in their development. And there's also barriers to executing that plan. We're going to offer some examples today of how you can act. And as Steve said, but throughout the day, we want you to think about what specifically you will commit to doing to drive this work forward. What will you leave here today committing to do to increase the competitiveness of our region in a way that is more inclusive? So we're here to talk about an opportunity for Greater Akron and its firms. Akron simply has a growth problem. And in order to grow, we must become more inclusive. This is an urgent imperative for businesses and economic development organizations. Inclusion isn't just the right thing to do. There's a strong business case for inclusion, and that's what we're here to talk about today. But before we dive further into the ways of systemic exclusion and how it affects our economy and businesses, we want to help establish the magnitude of the problem. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to ask you 2 questions, and I'd like for you to think of a specific number for each question. First, for every $100 in income that a white family earns, what does a black family earn? And second, for every $100 in wealth that a black family has, what does a white family have? Now we're going to go to our Menti poll. So you all had the instructions on your Menti poll, so you can enter your answers anonymously and then think about the answer. So we're going to give you a couple seconds to do that. When asked that question for every $100 in income that a white family earns, what does a black family earn? The average respondent says $86. The true number is $57. These numbers represent the national averages. And then ask that same question about wealth of a white family versus what wealth of a black family, the average respondent says $85. But the true number is $5. Note who the average respondent is: high income white respondents. The fact that your answer was likely under $100 indicates that you are aware of the gap. But beyond that, the fact that the average answer is so far off from the real answer, it shows that we are really disengaged from the problem and we're off track from solving it. But just to bring it a little closer to home, in Akron, income inequality is even worse than the national average. Instead of that $57 figure you saw up there, the true number drops to $39 for Akron. Income inequality is alive and real. And this is something that we really need to address in order to be more competitive. Looking locally, Akron is faring worse than other regions with respect to our ability to be inclusive, particularly as it relates to the black population. As indicated here, Akron is in the bottom 10 of the largest 100 metros with respect to growth in black employment rate. And we're in the bottom 5 of 100 with respect to black income growth. There's a stark difference from what has been experienced in both categories for our white population. So here's the issue. A large portion of our population has been systemically excluded from participating in our economy. This systemic exclusion is having a negative impact on our community nationally as well as regionally, both of which has implications on your businesses and on your ability to be competitive. How can our region thrive if 1/3 of its largest city doesn't have the same opportunities?
When we say Akron, we're not picking on the city. We're talking about Greater Akron, the Akron MSA primarily here. There's some places with the city, but mostly it's the MSA. But if we think about growth, we've been treading water in a sink or swim economy. And as we look at how Akron ranks with respect to the 100 largest metros, in key indicators of success, we're 89th out of 100 in job growth. And we're 72nd out of 100 in growth of young firms, which is critical to sustainable competition. We can't be satisfied with this type of performance because just treading water with the headwinds coming at us means eventually we drown. We're also losing out on innovation and invention in our community. And innovation is a key driver of sustainable growth. As we can see here, we're not supporting our entire population to become inventors and entrepreneurs. In the Cleveland-Akron area where we could get data for, kids born 80 to 84 became inventors at the rates that you see below there. You see the distance between female and minority inventors, or low-income inventors, and male inventors. So we're losing out on people who can bring great ideas to our community by not further driving that. Also, in Ohio in general, our startup rate is below most other places in the country, 5th worst in the country, with only 0.2% of Ohio's population starting a new business in a given year. And when you look at those numbers cut by race and gender, it's even worse. These things are holding back our growth. Traditional economic development efforts to say, okay, how do we fix this? We're going to go out and we're going to grab a bunch of companies and bring them back here. We're going to grab a bunch of people and bring them back here, and that's going to fix our problem. But that's changed a lot too. Traditional economic approaches are less effective. In fact, business relocations, companies moving from one place to another, are down by 50%. So there's a lot less activity, and that activity costs communities a lot more. Recall the HQ3 process for Amazon with $3 billion in incentives being given to move them to the community. It's hard for communities like us to be able to sort of compete. We can still attract some companies, but we can't count on that. At the same time, foreign direct investment versus the national average here is lower as well. 31%, down 31% for our region as well. And this is money coming in from other places to our community. Again, still opportunity there, but it's not going to sort of get there just by focusing on attracting others. In addition, our jobs continue to go unfilled. So the other thing is, if we can't get companies here, let's go attract people. So let's just go out and bring more of those people who've left Akron back. Let's go out and find people to relocate here. And we know when people come here, they love it here. They don't want to leave, but we're still not getting enough of those folks either. When we think about how many folks come to fill our open jobs, we have about 20,000 open jobs in the region, 7,000 of which require at least a bachelor's degree. We're currently attracting only 550 adults with bachelor's degrees per year, and our overall population has been flat. So as we think about how we fill, if we even doubled what we were doing in attraction, which would be a big thing to celebrate, a big success for us, we'd still have only enough people to fill a small number of jobs, and we'd still have 5,900 open higher skilled jobs and 13,000 other jobs. So we're not going to attract our way out of this. We've got to think about how we grow from two different perspectives. You can either grow organically by growing the people and the companies that you have, or you can grow by acquisition. And as you've seen, acquisition can be helpful to us, but it's not going to solve our full problem. Elevate Greater Akron is very focused on how we grow the existing companies and existing people that we have here. And with respect to talent, we have a lot of organizations focused on workforce development that are doing work. As a business community, though, we want to make sure that we are connecting all of us to that work and ensuring that we're driving forward together on filling these jobs and skilling up the people that we have.
And there is good news. The good news is that we have people here for your open jobs. Right here, and here's what that population looks like. We have 13,000 skilled people in Akron who don't have a job but want one. And if I were to read some of your minds, I've been known to be a mind reader at times. Some of you may be thinking, well, they aren't skilled enough to fill my positions. Well, each of these individuals has at least some college training, and half of them have earned a 4-year degree. And the black population is overrepresented by a factor of 2 here. These people are willing and able to fill your open positions if given the opportunity. Not only do we have thousands on the sidelines ready to contribute, we have over 60,000 underemployed, skilled individuals who are prepared to contribute at a higher level than where they are today. The vast majority of these people have at least earned a 2-year degree, representing a level of education and skill that can help our region's businesses meet their goals. We must do a better job of extending our opportunities to our entire population. Looking at Akron's black population that has earned an associate degree, those individuals fare far worse here than in some of our peer cities in terms of holding a well-paying job. Meanwhile, our similarly educated white population holds well jobs at a rate that is comparable to our peer cities. In essence, not only are blacks behind whites here in our city, blacks in our city are faring worse than other blacks in our peer cities. This disparity represents a loss of about 1,000 well-paying jobs for our black population. These opportunity gaps hurt our region's competitiveness.
So we know this is important. We know it can be impactful. It's necessary, but it's not easy. There's barriers. How can we have 13,000 skilled people in this community, in this economy, that want a job and can't find one? How are we missing these people? As you think about that, let's take a look at this.
Please have a seat. I'll be honest. Your resume, it's not what I'm used to.
I know.
Okay, so what would you bring to my company?
What do you need?
I need a hard worker.
Good. I've got 2 part-time jobs and I help my parents pay the bills.
I need problem-solving skills.
I got through high school without a car, a phone, or a computer.
No college degree, though.
Not yet, but life's taught me a lot and I'm ready for more.
Well, you're not the typical kind of candidate that I hire. But you are exactly what I'm looking for.
Your company could be missing out on the candidates it needs most. Learn how to find, cultivate, and train a great pool of untapped talent at gradsoflife.org.
She never made it to that interview. Why did she never make it to that interview? Lots of reasons, lots of barriers out there. for these skilled employees looking for work. In some cases, people just can't get to the jobs that exist. We've seen companies move away from cities, where traditionally the majority of the low-income population resides. Low-income workers who may lack their own transportation and therefore rely on public transportation often can't overcome the more complex commute. So if you think about the misconception, let's think about that misconception for folks that don't have a car. You might be thinking, there's lots of ways to get to work, right? It's not hard. Car, we got bus, we got Uber, we got all these different things. But when we think about mobility and we think about connecting to that job, it's a little bit more difficult. Let's say you just live outside of Akron and work in our Twinsburg job hub. You have to get to work by 8 o'clock for a typical shift start time. No problem. Let's say you've got your kids on their school bus at 7 and delivered to daycare. Okay, still no problem there if you have a car. Now let's say you rely on public transportation to get to work. Now we've got a problem, because to get to that job in enough time to feel like if something happens, you get there, by 7:45, something like that, you've got to leave home by 6. It's an hour and a half commute to get to Twinsburg by public transportation. That creates a barrier to those paying jobs out there for folks who are living our inner city communities. So transportation is a barrier, but what can you do as employers to help? Maybe you think about shifting your shift times with Metro to make sure that people can get there with a little bit more time to spare. Another serious barrier is our collective hiring processes. So approximately 3/4 of the jobs are never really posted out there. They happen through referral networks. But 75% of white people live in neighborhoods with other white people. And almost 50% of our companies have employee referral programs where they're asking those folks who they currently have to go get more folks. So you're even one more step removed from bringing new people into the organization who might not look like the people who are there today. Unconscious bias is a third major issue. We're all subject to this. We've talked a lot about this broadly in the region, but our path in life is sometimes shaped by how we're perceived by others, even without them knowing it. Admitting that's real is important, and understanding it a little bit more is important for our processes. Some part of where we are relates to how others perceive us. So unconscious bias can be the difference between us having a funny hijinks moment as teenagers where you might get a warning or a citation versus maybe be searched and put into jail because of the way you're perceived by others. And for an employer, little things like a name on a resume, a hairstyle, a place that they live might play into whether or not that person gets to that interview without you even knowing it.
Despite these barriers, being inclusive of all potential candidates poses benefits to your company and for our region beyond just filling open jobs and reinforcing the talent pipeline. In particular, workforce diversity and inclusion helps generate profitability and innovation, which are two key components of growth and competitiveness. Think again about your own organization. How diverse is that leadership team? How inclusive is your culture? Have you ever thought about or participated or administered in a culture assessment for your organization, just to see get the feel of what kind of culture is within your organization? Diversity and inclusion drive innovation. Companies that have diverse leadership are significantly more likely to create a business environment where employees really feel encouraged to propose new ideas and where those ideas are developed and deployed into the marketplace. This is the kind of environment that facilitates innovation and sustainable competitiveness, where we can leverage the varied experiences and ideas of our talent pool and then capitalize on them. Diversity and inclusion drive innovation, and innovation drives profitability. Diversity and inclusion are key drivers of financial performance. As highlighted in McKinsey's recent study, companies in the top quartile of diversity were 33% more likely to outperform their peers. And companies that had the most diverse boards were 43% more likely to achieve higher profits than their peers. And just to illustrate how a diverse workforce and inclusive corporate culture impact innovation and performance within the organization, consider how Mattel leveraged its in-house African American Forum group to create a genuine Black Barbie doll. Now, regardless of what you think about the concept of Barbie, I want you to really hone in on the point that I'm really trying to make here. So don't hold that against me, but really listen to the point. Rather than simply giving the existing white Barbie doll a darker skin color, which they tried to do back in the 60s, they incorporated feedback from this employee resource group to get distinctive details like giving the doll a name and skin tone and making sure the hair was right. And this intentional effort helped Mattel provide a successful product to an under-leveraged market, which increased their profit margin. And just on last month, August 24th, they recently released the Rosa Parks doll, albeit there's a little controversy around that, but in just under 3 weeks, the doll is already sold out.
So we can do something about this. As multidimensional as the issue is, so are the solutions. So we want to talk a little bit about some of the actions that we can take to create a more inclusive workforce and economy. And as I talk about some of these examples, think about what's within your ability and power to do in your company. Everybody in this room can do something, whether it's in your company, and if you're the CEO, you can make it so. If you're somebody who works in another part of the organization, what can you do with your colleagues? What can you do with the board you're on? What are some of these ideas that you can bring back and share with some others? And many of you have many people from your company here, so what do you talk about afterwards to figure out what you can do next? None of these things that we are talking about are super hard. But doing them in the context of everything else you have going on every day requires you to be pretty intentional about them. You need to fill a job. It's really difficult to wait on that until you find the right candidate. But sometimes you just have to look a little harder. Sometimes you need additional resources, support, or help to take action. So again, the cards on your table. If there's something that you need help with, let us know what those are. We'll try to put those resources within reach to you. If everyone here decides to do one thing, task somebody with one thing, or measure one thing, we can make significant progress as a group. So there's 5 areas that we're sort of focus in on, and just ideas for you. What can we do in terms of creating an environment of diversity? What can we do to develop our current and future workforce? What can we do about a diverse set of suppliers? How do we evaluate our hiring practices? And how do we support the growth and creation of minority-owned businesses? These are all areas where we want to take action over the next few years in this region. And the foundation of this work is to create an environment in your organization around diversity. So what can you do to better focus on the culture of your organization? And there's lots of examples out here, but here's just a few to think about. How do you get more folks aware of unconscious bias training in your organization? There are 30 plus facilitators in Greater Akron that can come in and help your teams do assessments and see where people are, where they think they are versus where they are in terms of their view and their unconscious bias. How can we get some of those folks connected to you? How do we support employee resource groups within companies? Many of our companies, our larger companies, have groups that bring together their black professionals, bring together their LGBT, bring together their women to sort of help change the environment and address issues that might not be as well addressed by the leadership that isn't as sensitive to them. So how do you build those in your company? How do you think about marketing? As we've sort of done some branding stuff in our organization, being very explicit about looking at, when I put a picture out there, who's in that picture, who's not in that picture. You have to think about that. It's not something we think about every day. We look at as hard as those who might be getting excluded look at, and how they look at what you think about them if you're not sort of representing that. Sponsorship versus mentoring in our organizations. Mentoring is nice. You sit down with somebody, have a cup of coffee, and you give them ideas. But when the door is closed and you're advocating for a promotion, how have you taken somebody who might not otherwise get that look and sponsored them into that next role? Put yourself out on the line for them to take them someplace that others don't know that they can go. And then, who is leading your work? Your CEO needs to lead your diversity work. This stuff starts from the top. If they only provide lip service to it, if they only mouth the words but don't take the actions, the work won't happen because everybody sees that. So how is your CEO being supported and encouraged to lead this work in the organization overall? As we look at our talent pipeline, there's lots of things we can do in terms of internships. Getting students experience and exposure and partnering with some of our workforce development programs to provide that. Just an example of something that connects us, our region's workforce intermediary done. You know, there was a local manufacturers decided to want to increase their engagement with the talent pipeline. So they brought in prospective employees, individuals like Michael Prude, who some of you may have heard his story, who hadn't considered at first a job in manufacturing. He didn't know what manufacturing was all about. He had an outdated vision of it, and he wasn't somebody who thought he wanted to be an engineer. He didn't necessarily start out thinking about working in the manufacturing floor. But as he toured the facilities at Kyocera, he really saw something he didn't understand about manufacturing. He basically saw the kind of environment, the kind of atmosphere, and got very excited about it. And that turned into a job for him out of high school. At one point, I believe his parents came in and met with the leaders there, and his mother, I think, remarked to the manager, Kisira, that her son was now making more than she was making on that manufacturing floor. And, got your attention? Anybody sleep there? And he continues to thrive there and get promoted there only a few years in, and they are now helping him to pay for his education as he goes forward. He never would have gotten that opportunity if the company hadn't decided to reach out and reach out more directly to the schools for some of the students that are coming through that program.
Some of our hiring practices have traditionally been criticized as being unfair. Our goal should be to eliminate bias in hiring, pay, and promotion to make sure that we don't miss the opportunity to attract and retain the best talented people. How many times have some of you said or heard, well, I've tried to find diverse candidates, but I just can't? Well, my question to you is, where are you looking? Have you reached out to organizations such as the Akron Urban League, Connexus, or even the Chamber? Have you really made your posted positions accessible to different candidate pools? A couple of ways of going about to achieve this is eliminate unnecessary job requirements that promote bias. Is a bachelor's degree really required, or can it be just preferred? Realistically, do we evaluate the years of experience that are required to step into a position? And do we consider candidates with past convictions? Another way about achieving this is to utilize a diverse set of interviewers to ensure that you get a more diverse perspective on your talent pool. And also be inclusive about promoting those job opportunities. Build relationships with minority professional networks and minority professional groups, HBCUs, historically black college and universities, NAACP, Greek organizations, and the like. The next step in this work is to be more intentional about engaging minority suppliers. Have you heard this line? Well, I don't want to lower my standards by switching to a minority supplier. Well, I got news for you. Hackett's 2017 Supply Diversity Study found that 99% of diverse suppliers meet or exceed procurement expectations. Engaging a diverse set of suppliers increases price competition, exposes your firm to innovative processes and solutions, and opens doors to new markets. A sample roadmap to moving forward in this strategy is first, just help to identify the low-hanging fruit. Begin to track where you're at, what you're already spending. Next, set a goal for what you should spend or what your spend should be for minority firms. Then tie that goal to performance pay and hold yourself accountable. Completing these three tasks will help your company enhance its supply chain and also sharpen its competitive advantage.
Entrepreneurship is the last area that we're looking at, and we think about how we can drive it in our companies, but how do we drive the startup of more companies and the growth of more companies? We talked about the hundreds of female and minority entrepreneurs that we're missing because of the lower startup rates. And not only are we missing those entrepreneurs, but those companies tend to be smaller and employ less people and not grow as large because of the lack of the kind of support and resources that many of our companies have access to. So how do we focus on driving that? How do we focus on working, for example, with the work that Doug Weintraub and the folks at Bounce are doing to drive more programming, more activity, more connectivity to minority entrepreneurs? How do we bring business owners together? How do we find a way to help them learn from each other in that space? If we can find a way to increase the jobs that we have, the employers that we have and the minority firms that we have in that space will increase jobs. There's a measure in economic development of traded sector firms. These are companies that create a product or service that goes outside of our region. So it's not your coffee shops and your restaurants, it's your manufacturers and suppliers. In all of Greater Akron, we have 16. 16 traded sector, minority-owned businesses. That's hundreds short of where we should be if we looked at ourselves versus other communities. We've got to find a way to change that. So we talked about some of the things that you could potentially do, some things that we're doing as part of the Elevate Greater Akron work that you'll hear more about. We're focusing on mid-tech. These jobs that sort of are in the growing tech area, a place that we can find folks that can get to a different trajectory of earning and on a faster growth path at higher average wages. How do we take folks who don't have a college degree but can be skilled up at a level where they can work in some of these higher paying, more demanding digital occupations. So that's a big area of focus for us with many of our partners. Creating an understanding of who are the diverse suppliers out there so you can find them, so we can connect you with them, and so we can support them and connect them to procurement opportunities. Focusing on understanding the ecosystem and doing more to connect people to the resources that do exist. Giving you the resources to do unconscious bias training in your organizations, and also bringing together roundtables of businesses to learn from each other, doing our storytelling to make sure the region knows about the companies and resources that exist, and then focusing on, at the Chamber ourselves, we're focusing on how we create a more inclusive leadership, more inclusive activity within the organization, and finally bringing together our diversity professionals in our organizations to learn from each other. Many, many people are doing work in this space. How do we share the successes with each other? So there's a lot of work to do in this space. The question is, what's the next thing that you can do? What have you heard here that you can actually take a step on with our help or with the help of your teammates to take a next step on diversity and inclusion in your organization? What will you do?
Thank you for watching SGTV, Socially Good Television. Visit sociallygoodtv.com and remember to share this video.